What are some English mistakes so commonly made that they're now considered acceptable? Not so much little mistakes like they're there or then because I see people being called out for those all the time. I'm more wondering about expressions. Like I couldn't care less, for example, which seems to have been adopted over time or tolerated, at least. Using was in clauses that technically require the subjunctive were. Using nauseous to mean experiencing nausea, instead of its original meaning of causing nausea. Experiencing nausea should really be nauseated, but it's in too much common usage now to go around trying to change things. That's saying if worse comes to worst. I continually see it written worse to worse. That doesn't even make sense. Apparently we've given up on the proper usage of lie rather than lay. I hate that could've, should've, and would've is becoming more popular. I see wary and weary being mixed up a lot. Irregardless. It's a double negative and we're back to with regard or regarding. It's regardless. I've always hated that. I could care less is definitely not accepted or tolerated, at least not by me. I remember when people were hanged and pictures were hung. Should've and on accident come to mind. Free rein instead of free rein. In Old English there is a crime called rapine, which is the violent confiscation of another person's property. And so in regards to what the Vikings did in Scotland, it was called rapine pillage. It's a type of pillaging. At some point in the 20th century people began to refer to it as rape and pillage. Which is fine. But not every single time rapine happened did rape necessarily happen. So it kinda portrays some of these events. People use affect and effect interchangeably. I'm not a native English speaker and those words are nothing alike in my language, so for me it's not even an issue when to use which, but I brought it up in a language discussion once and got tons of replies from mostly Americans who confessed they had no idea. The person that instead of who. Loose instead of lose. It's when referring to ownership. It's always it's when referring to ownership. You wouldn't say his, hers, theirs, or yours. People keep saying everyday when they mean every day. Also, people keep putting hyphens in numbers for no reason. Like when I was 2 years old. Thirdly, nobody seems to remember what worse and worst mean. Also, everybody spells woe wrong, thanks a lot. Whoa dude. And everyone says addicting instead of addictive, thanks a lot. Addictinggames.com. Use whom punk, I dare ya. Literally meaning figuratively. Edit to give an example, I literally died when I saw her dress. It was so cute. Mixing up the words lend and borrow. Can you borrow me some money? As someone who works in the finance industry, this one drives me bonkers. For sell if you spend more than 30 seconds on Facebook Marketplace. Putting the dollar after the value. I get that most other currencies put the symbol after the value. And when spoken it makes sense there. But for the USD currency it goes on the left, and that's not optional. Saying normalcy instead of normality. Saying nip it in the bud, instead of nip it in the bud. Semi-weekly, semi-monthly, semi-annually being confused with bi-weekly, bi-monthly, and biannually. Using seen, when saw is correct. One I see on Reddit all the time is people using Q instead of Q. Like someone will tell a story. Then came the big crash. Q my girlfriend asking, what was that? I'm generally okay with lots of grammar and dialect variations. But for some reason this one drives me absolutely crazy. Maybe it's partially because I often see it in stories whose tone voice I also find really obnoxious. All intents and purposes versus all intensive purposes. Using a lot? My biggest pet peeves: good versus well, poisonous versus venomous. Don't ask why, irregardless. It drives me crazy that I seen is now more commonly said than I saw. The other one that sets my teeth on edge is when people say something like, Mike and myself went to the conference. Should have instead of should have. I've just given up on that one. Using past simple form instead of past participle, e.g. I should have when saying irregardless. I have heard people use the term de-thaw to suggest they are causing a frozen object to no longer be frozen. Bastards. Using literally when you mean figuratively. Using begs the question to mean raises the question is apparently just how we use that phrase now. Things with titles are not entitled. They are titled. Nonplussed to mean unaffected, when it really means so agitated that you couldn't be any more agitated. From Latin non, not, and plus, more. Not acceptable in my book. But the yours, and the theirs seem to pop up more often these days. Irregardless. It has been used so much that they had to put it in the dictionary. Using literally just as an amplifier rather than its actual literal meaning. I hear people say on accident instead of by accident so often that I've just stopped correcting it at all. Loose and lose are really starting to become interchangeable with younger generations. 10 items or less should actually be 10 items or fewer. Instantaneously used instead of instantly. The former is for new things that happen at the same time as other new things in a situation, a combination of instantly and simultaneously. Not just a new thing happening in the situation. Most people currently use it as a synonym of instantly. Ending a sentence with a preposition. You know what I'm talking about. The word normalcy was originally a mistake by U.S. presidential candidate Warren G. Harding on the campaign trail in 1920. He called for a return to normalcy, which was not a word at the time. It was catchy though, and had since been used by other campaigns, such as Biden's. It has entered the English language through one man's mistake. People posting pictures and saying so and I instead of the correct so and me. When you are the object. It's correct to say me and people seem to think I is always correct. It drives I nuts. The absurd use of the word anyways instead of correctly using anyway. Run-ons are so massively common that, when I learned what a run-on is, I struggled to realize that it was grammatically incorrect. Only egregious run-ons feel wrong. But moderate run-ons are very common. If you want to be precise with your grammar, y'all need to learn and use your fanboys. Overuse of the word myself. Melissa bought some pizza for John and myself. No. Melissa bought some pizza for John and me. The word snuck. It's common now and most people use it. But sneaked is technically correct. I've even heard many people correct someone for using the word sneak and saying it's not a real word. I also see it's common now for people to completely forget many past participles exist and say things like took instead of taken, broke instead of broken, ate instead of eaten, etc. I think it makes people sound like idiots, but oh well. There are so many that make me wonder whether they're not teaching them anymore in schools. X200B. The difference between a while and a while. The difference between anymore and anymore. If it was X200B. But in my opinion the worst offender is and will always be using jealous when you mean envious. People say they are a part of something, but they mean a part. Misuse of the word concerning as a predicate adjective, which it isn't. Disturbing conveys the same sense more accurately.